Okay, so now we are going to talk about actually accessing your logs in Docker. Just to recap, we are in this build Flask app Docker, this project download. We have run Docker compose up. Okay, and that brought up our service. Actually, I'll just redo it. Okay, so we ran Docker compose up, that brought up our service file. We have two services in this Docker compose file. We have a Flask app server, and we have an Nginx service. Okay, so we have both of these things, and because we are running this in the foreground, we can see the logs in real time. They just continually spit out to the screen. So every time there is a process in one of our services that is writing to standard error or to standard out, that is going to come out in the Docker compose logs. But it is quite often the case that you want to run Docker compose as a daemon, or maybe you want to do a bit of searching in the logs because these can get very, very long, especially if you have a lot of services. So what we're going to do here is we're going to head on over to our other terminal. Oh, and you can use this functionality in either case. You can use it if you're running Docker compose here in the foreground, or you can use it if you're running Docker compose also just as a daemon. So I'm going to say Docker compose logs Flask app server. Okay, and this is going to get me all the logs just specifically from the Flask app server. I'm going to do the same thing for Nginx. Okay, and you can see I did the same thing for Nginx. So now just to recap this, because I know it's a bit funny the way that you call the different commands, like when you use the full name, when you use the service name. So Docker compose images, this means that when you ran Docker compose up, it built an image. Because we have a build context here, it built an image, and the full name of that image, like if you wanted to do Docker run blah blah blah, in fact I'll just show you that, Docker run -it build Flask app Docker Flask app server bash. Okay, so you can see it created a Docker image named this thing here. I'm not going to say it all again. Named after the build context, or the Docker compose context rather, and then the name of the service so build Docker compose context underscore name of service. This is exactly like earlier when we ran Docker build and then we passed in that -t for tag flag. Same thing, just different way of doing it. It's nice too because it's very consistent. You don't ever have to think about, what do I name my image? Well, just name your service and name your directory and you're fine. The Nginx is a little bit different just because we're using an image that already exists. But you can see that's how those are named. But for the most part, when you run Docker compose commands, you're going to be running them from within your project directory. And then it's just Docker compose, in this case logs, right? Flask app server. Okay, and then you get that. If you remember from earlier, just to kind of hammer home this point, Flask app server bash. Okay, so when you call the Docker compose commands, it's Docker compose command name, service name, and then if you have any additional arguments. So getting back to logging here, so let's say I have a ton of logs in this particular service, and I just want to get 10 lines. Okay, Docker compose logs --tail. And this is also, this is like any other command line application where you can do Docker compose logs --help, and you can get the different things. I mean, you can get the different parameters. You can get just a regular help screen, just as you would. Well, let's do timestamps. That's kind of fun. Did I do Flask app server? Okay, and then you can get like the hardcore timestamps as well. So these are these are the timestamps that are recorded from Docker, these are the timestamps that come up because Gunicorn is running a logger, and within that logger, that's like the logging string is, you know, like if you run a logger and the logging string is generally formatted a particular way, and it's usually like time, sometimes the priority of the message, whether it's info, debug, warn, fatale, and then the actual message itself. So you have the date here because that's running actually from the Gunicorn process. And then additionally, you also have the date from Docker itself. So this is pretty nice. You know, you can actually do like a lot of handy things here. If you get into logging infrastructure, that's like a whole nother DevOps world, is just dealing with logging, but it's a pretty fun world if you ever want to get into it. So you can see how that works. We can do the exact same thing for the Nginx service. Okay, and then there you go. You can see it. We have, this is the timestamp from Docker. This is the timestamp from the Nginx logger. Yeah, and then you can actually see this one is formatted a little bit differently. So we could change this. We could say 1. Yeah, dash tail 1. Okay. I'll do it again so that it's a bit clearer. Okay, so this time I did dash tail 1 dash T. Just as a quick aside, for this particular command line application, like some command line applications, they're a bit more flexible with where you can put your command line arguments. But let's just say if we did this wouldn't work. It has to be Docker compose logs, or any of them really, the arguments to logs, the name of the container, and then that's it for logs. So again, Docker compose logs, and then we could also have our arguments to log, and then this is the service name, and that is how that goes. So that's it for logging. I hope that you can see how the logging works, how it's really, really powerful. It's really, really handy to get, you know, to like kind of keep track and see what's happening, also without having to necessarily look for things. So one of the things I joke about is that, you know, like where I work is run by find and grep, which people think is hilarious, and then they realize that it's true, and then they start to get kind of worried. But say you wanted to do this, and you wanted to grep for a particular date. So I'm gonna grep for 2019. You can do that because it's still just a regular Linux terminal, right? It's still just a regular Linux command. And this is pretty nice with the Gunicorn as well, because then, I mean, so maybe I just want to grep for debug. Okay, then you can see everything that everything that came out from the logger as debug, or maybe you want to grep for fatale. Okay, nothing came out as fatale, so that's good, right? So yeah, so that's it. There's a lot of handy tips and tricks for using Docker Compose, and especially for using the logs. I use the logs I use them all the time. They are really, really, really great to use. So that's it for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.